Welcome to Daps Magic, Disney and Positive Stuff. I'm Mr. Daps, and today I'm very excited to talk about something that's being discussed this weekend at D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan Event. That's right, Leslie Iwerks has a new documentary out called Disney Worldbuilders, and I had the opportunity to see it before it's released on Disney Plus and also shown at D23. So I thought today I would take a few minutes to share my thoughts about this, spoiler-free, and give you an idea of what you're in for when it does arrive on Disney Plus. Before all of that, though, I'd encourage you just to take a moment to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this, and let me know in the comments what you are most excited about with Disney Worldbuilders and any of the D23 announcements that happened this weekend. All right, with that, let's get into Disney Worldbuilders, the newest Leslie Iwerks film, documentary, whatever you want to call it. And really, at this core, Disney Worldbuilders isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be about specifics. And what I really discovered is that it's about stories. It's about how great stories aren't just entertainment. They're something that's personal, they're hopeful, and they're built on human connection. And this happens both on the screen and in the parks. But what I discovered during the watching of Disney Worldbuilders is that all of these world builders really recognize that to tell a great story, it comes from something within. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to be walking away from, because I saw this, and as I mentioned a minute ago, I expected it to be, A, B, and C, I'm going to see this, and it'll talk about how they physically or the steps for building something, building a world, whether it was on the screen or in the parks. And what I really discovered, it was something so much more fundamental and broad and bigger. And it really, I think, is more inspiring this way, rather than like, here's how we built a mountain, or here's how we built an attraction, whatever that is. So there were a few lessons that really jumped out at me. And the first one starts really early in the documentary. And in both Bob Iger and Pete Docter really make this a point of what they're sharing in their moments in this documentary. And it really comes down to the fact that a great storyteller owns their story. It's something that comes from within. It's an extension of who they are, and it's something that's very personal. And it's something that, when it is personal and when it's a great storyteller telling a great story, it really is something that will evoke human feelings, like real human feelings, and it will help them connect with other people. And that's probably why some of these great stories and these great worlds that we've experienced because of these stories really do become those favorite memories through the years. They're those shared experiences. And I thought it was interesting because I don't remember who said it, but basically that every theme park attraction, really, at the end of the day, came to being because a great storyteller told a great story first. And that seems so fundamental to what Disney is and what they do. And we hear, this is a storytelling company all of the time. But we don't always focus on the fundamentals of what it is to be a storyteller. What comes out of really good stories. It's very easy to be like, Rise of the Resistance is an amazing attraction. But that grew out and was born out of a story. And I thought that was something that changed my perspective as I was looking at the different attractions, both new and old, of story led to the world. And the world building really comes from great storytellers. And so this could have easily been a documentary that was, Disney storytelling or something. Like, it could have easily changed the name, but it's more than just the storytelling. It's what comes out of those stories and the worlds that are built because of those stories. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Second thing that I thought was interesting too, and I think Jon Favreau said this, and maybe Bob as well, but there's a delicate balance that happens with Disney. And it comes all the way back to the foundations of Disney itself with Walt. And that's balancing the yesterday, the today, and tomorrow. And you even think of the sign that you see when you walk into Disneyland. Here you leave today, and I'm messing up the quote at the moment, but it alludes to that. But really, when you look at what Disneyland is, it celebrates yesterday, today, and tomorrow in many different ways. And this was the realization, I guess you could say, of Walt's formula of the balance of respecting the value of nostalgia, which we all love, while also having that eye to the future, that forward mindset. And I think that's a really hard balance to find. But we go back to Disney world builders and great storytellers with a great story with these things in mind. That does make some of the best worlds that we've gotten to experience. The other thing this does is when you mix both the new and the old, it keeps stories relevant. It gives them a history. It gives them a connection point. It's not just a shiny droid in Galaxy's Edge. It's one that's had some action. It's seen some stories that we may not even know about, but we see the BDX droids walking around, and clearly they've been somewhere and done something. And I don't think that comic book has been written yet, or they haven't had their backstory made into a cartoon series or something. But when you have those elements of the new and the old, it makes it easier to connect with them, and it also makes them, it's a relevance thing. Star Wars is such a great example of this because it's not just the visuals. It's how it makes people feel. It's the tone. It's the details. It's the history, as I mentioned before. And when you have all of these things, you also want to have that human connection. So whether it's droids, whether it's Grogu with Mando walking around, like, you want to have those moments that touch you at the core, at the heart, and you walk away going, hey, this was something special. This was something memorable. This was something different than anywhere else I could experience it. And that's really something that makes Disney different. And it sets great storytellers apart from okay storytellers, because I'm sure if we think of just animated movies through all of the studios, we can think of some really, really great movies that were made by Disney and other, DreamWorks, whoever. And, Beauty and the Beast comes to mind, Aladdin, Lion King, Snow White, Cinderella. There's so many really amazing movies that have made through the years, but they came from great storytellers. There's other ones that you go like, oh yeah, I saw that. And I'm sure if we sat here and thought about it for a bit, you would come up with that too. But they didn't have that feeling or that connection point that came through the human connection that had come from the storytellers themselves to really make something that connects with the audiences, and then also the audience connect with each other when they're experiencing it, whether it's on the stage or whether it's in the parks. That's something that's really important. And I think there's depth that comes with that balance of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so they kind of build on each other. You have the great storytellers, and then you have the balancing act that they use when they're creating these amazing stories. And then you have like the story of the storyteller. And this is that whole finding yourself through story and character. And that isn't always an easy thing to do. In fact, it's one of the harder things to do. And as they're talking to these different world builders, this part really came through with both Dave Filoni and Jared Bush telling their stories and finding the stories that have characters who are relatable to audiences. Dave Filoni, obviously would look to the original hero of Star Wars with Luke Skywalker and things like that. But you want to look for these people that are in a place where isn't comfortable, where there's something blocking their future, but they know that there's a bigger, brighter world out there. And this is where it got interesting, because both of these guys really hit on a principle that great storytellers don't just expand our view of the world, they expand the view of ourselves. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective as I was watching it. And sometimes that means the storyteller has to shift their perspective. And maybe it's changing the perspective of a worldview of a character. Maybe it's the perspective of the worldview of the viewer. But how you can change the perspective will change everything. I've heard the old quote in politics that politics is perception, and the perception really determines reality. And when you find yourself through that, like, you can connect to those stories and those obstacles that these characters go through, that's really when you can connect with a bigger and better story. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. And then you add on to that fairy tales, and this was really something that Jennifer Lee brought in. Fairy tales really come down to helping people cope with life's challenges and helping them discover potential through adversity. And I thought it was really interesting because I saw this in several of the people that shared through this. And it really was inspiring, because these great storytellers that are in this documentary share about their own personal struggles, their own personal adversity, their own personal challenges that they had to go through, that really, if they hadn't, they probably wouldn't have been as great of a storyteller as they ended up being, or a world builder in this case. And listening to them tell their stories and seeing the accompanying visuals with that, it was really interesting because it humanized these people in a way that, we see them on stage, we see them on screens, and they do these incredible things. But each one of them was a kid at one point. Each one of them, I think basically everybody that had a old school haircut shown, I was like, oh, yep, that's a sign of the time. That's pretty funny. But they all had to go through their own journey and their own path with obstacles and challenges to get to the point where they were able to not just survive the story, but really begin to use their story to tell a greater story. And I thought that was interesting. There was something said about possibility made real. And I've had that stuck in my head since I heard it. And it really was fascinating, because it really comes down to good stories empowering the creation of even more good stories. And they build on each other, and they can, it's the snowball effect. And it kind of makes sense when you start thinking of that, why there would be that era in the 90s where it just seemed like Disney kept releasing great movie after great movie after great movie. And we're kind of in an era like that now too, with Frozen and Zootopia, and I guess Rapunzel towards the beginning of that, like even further back. But it really is almost a mathematical equation in the most unmathematical way, that when these things come together and these great storytellers really are like, they're like coal, they're beaten to a diamond. When they do this, that is what leads to a great story, which leads to another great story. And then things continue to build on that and to progress. Another thing that popped up to me that I thought was an interesting takeaway from this was the importance of optimism coupled with hard work, and then a belief, which kind of goes with optimism, but a belief that it could happen. It's very much the Princess and the Frog. You can have a wish, but you have to work for it too. And it was interesting because Kevin Feige and Bob Iger both talked about the importance of, optimism, hard work, and belief. And I think it was Kevin Feige that basically grew up in the world where you heard all the time, the future can be and should be better, but only if you make it so. Something like that. I only watched it once. But I was listening to that and I was thinking about it. And I was realizing that informs the way he tells stories with Marvel and the way Disney tells stories. And it's not just a thing where belief is just closing your eyes and wishing. It's then opening the eyes, getting to work, and you having the belief that you can through the obstacles, that connects with everything else. And that was an interesting thing. And I thought it was fascinating because I also thought, I think it was Kevin Feige who talked about his perspective on construction walls. And I'm not going to talk about anything in construction, but I will say this. I loved that his perspective on construction walls isn't that they're ugly, isn't that they're an inconvenience, isn't that they're in the way. It means that there's more magic coming. The adventure's just getting started. There's going to be something new. And when that wall comes down, you're going to get to experience something like you've never experienced before. And it's a world of possibility. I mean, that's what Disney's all about. It's about the world of possibility. And this documentary, as they're talking about these things, you start realizing that there's some similar themes that we're going through now that are interwoven with all of these incredible storytellers and world builders and really people that change the world for better through the positive content they put out, which I thought was such a wonderful takeaway from this. Like it was not something I expected at all. I mean, this whole documentary was not what I expected at all. And I loved it for that. But what I did walk away thinking was like, oh, this is not an ode to the certain storyteller or a creator or executive or anything like that. This really is a laying on the table the philosophy of what Disney is now moving forward. And actually it's going back today, yesterday, and tomorrow, like how yesterday informs the world that we are living in today in the Disney community and how it's also informing the future. And I loved that it wasn't just about, I had a rough story, so it made a great story. It was also rough stories need to be accompanied by that optimism, by that hard work, by that belief, that positive you can, and pushing through, because nothing just poofs into existence. It takes a lot of work, a lot of sweat, a lot of heartache sometimes to create things, Daps included. And I think that was a really great way to acknowledge the struggles, but also focusing on the where you're going as opposed to what's stopping you. And I love that kind of a mindset because I just think it makes it's possibility thinking. It's like well, what if we could do this as opposed to what if we can't? Another big thing that was in this that I loved that came from James Cameron, Josh D'Amaro, and even surprisingly, Tom Fitzgerald, which I wasn't expecting to see in here. The placemaking and the world building is all about immersion, but not necessarily in the way you would think. There was an analogy of a painting and how you create a sense in a painting that there's something beyond what the centerpiece of the painting is. I think it was James Cameron or something, but he was talking about the distant mountains in the painting that are way off in the distance, but they give you the thought that, hey, there's something more out there. There's somewhere more to explore. The story continues beyond just the land that I'm in, whether it's Cars Land, Pandora, Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge, even Fantasyland. I'm thinking particularly Fantasyland and Magic Kingdom. or Fantasy Springs in Tokyo Disney Sea. But when you're in these places, and even when you're watching a lot of these movies, you get the sense that something else was happening over there. Something else was happening over there. And that the depth of that world doesn't just exist in this small time and place. Because if that's all it is, it's not going to be as memorable of a movie as oh, this character just came in from that land way over there, we don't know what it is. Or I see an old tree over there, I wonder how that tree ended up looking that way. Like, there's so many stories to be found when there are those distant mountains, per se. And that's an exciting thing, because then it connects more. It gets the imagination going of what possibly could be in these stories. And it makes the immersion come to life that much more, even if it is quite literally a painted mountain, maybe like in Mickey's Toontown. And in a perfect world, when it's completely done right, which I think Disney does do, in the theme parks, because the immersion thing can happen and world building can happen in movies and in the parks. But in theme parks in particular, it allows guests to connect with their own personal stories or connect the stories, I guess I should say, with what they loved on the screen. So maybe you're connecting because you are seeing the Millennium Falcon in Galaxy's Edge. Maybe you're connecting because the lights are turning on in Cars Land, and you know that moment in Cars, and that beautiful moment in the movie is now being recreated right in front of you, or even just walking into Cars Land. What am I saying? But now your life story and who you're with and the connection that you're with is being reflected with the movie. And you've become a part of that story. And I know a few years ago, there was a lot said about, you're a part of the story. This really is what it is. And I think to an extent that's true. Maybe it wasn't communicated perfectly, but in a really good world build, in a really well-built world, you do feel like you're part of that story. You do feel like, oh, Luke Skywalker could walk around the corner at any moment, or Lightning McQueen's going to come around the corner of Route 66, which they do. And, or maybe even getting to see Captain Marvel walking through Avengers Camp. Like, there's so many moments where what we see on the screen comes to life right in front of us in the parks. And then we become a part of that story that's continued on in reality right in front of us, as opposed to just what we saw on the screen. And then the bigger goal with that is really to create these shared moments, whether they're happiness, whether they're inspiring, or maybe it's a moment of connection with those that we really care about. But it creates a core memory to really go into inside out terms. And it's all very intentional. Like, they've clearly thought this through. They've realized these are very important things to create a great story, to create a great world that we're building, and to really help people get the most out of that. And not just from a visual, flashy, whatever perspective, but from the simpler heart things and the emotional things that we connect with as we're walking through the parks, as we're walking down Main Street, USA, and seeing the Dapper Dans singing, maybe in Town Square, and then you got a piano player up at Refreshment Corner, Coke Corner, whatever name you call it. But it creates moments that connect you with not just the land, not just with the park, but those that you're with also. And you carry those memories with you. And from a business standpoint, this really wasn't in here, but from a business standpoint, this is great too, because as you carry those happy memories, you want more of them. So you come back and you build these lifelong Disney fans, and these fans that go back and forth to Disneyland year after year after year, maybe week after week in some cases. But it really does change how people experience things, and how they carry that experience with them. And I think that's something really special that not everybody does well. Like, I haven't been to every theme park around the world, and I haven't been to every other company, but I've been enough to know that Disney's in a league of its own, and that Disney really does build these worlds, tells these stories in a way that nobody else can. And I love that that's such a foundational thing with Disney, dating back to Walt Disney, but it's continued on for over 100 years. And now with Josh D'Amaro leading the company into the next chapter, era, or whatever you want to call it, of Disney history, this is something that is still very integral to the future of the company. And not just because it's good business sense, it's because it's a foundational, central tenet of what the Walt Disney Company is. And so I keep going back to that beginning of great storytellers tell great stories. And I keep thinking, what are the future great stories we're going to get? Because really, this is what it set it up for me, is as I was watching this film, there's so many fun details and so many interesting perspectives and moments in this. But the thing that it did the most was it got me thinking about great storytelling, world building, what if, like what could be possible. And I saw this admittedly going into D23. So I didn't know what the announcements were going to be, but it got me wondering what the announcements could be in a different way. Because you start thinking of, not in the terms of what's the next great ship, what's the next great attraction or land or park. And I started thinking, well, how are they going to tell the next great story? What is that next great story? What is the world that's going to be built out of that story? It changed my perspective going into the Disney Entertainment Showcase on Friday night, because rather than it being like, oh, that's going to be a cool movie, I definitely have the perspective now of great movie, great story. Is this also a great world that's being built out of this story? You know, like, we don't have a huge Moana presence in the parks, but that's a story I could totally imagine coming to life somewhere. And I love that this approach, I guess I should say, to world building creates lots of possibilities. It also creates a lot of what's the word I'm going for? It really pushes people to a next level. I think it was Jared Bush talks about sometimes a story is not great and you get the feedback that's rough, but it helps really hone in a great story. And that's an interesting thing to think about too, because great stories aren't just natural either. They are something that are carefully crafted. They take lots of heartache. They take lots of work, blood, sweat, and tears. You hear the stories of people working round the clock to make their deadlines and all of these things, but you really see it true. And you really see the reason that the people that are in this documentary is because they're each great storytellers in their own little part of the Walt Disney Company or their realm of storytelling. And because of this, it's not that they're really popular executives or something like that. It really is because they have built a career and reached a level of leadership by being great storytellers, and leaders too, probably. But you recognize that's that core thread. And you also recognize that these people are getting promoted because they're great storytellers. And they're the ones leading the Walt Disney Company now as these storytellers. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about as we're moving into this new era of the Walt Disney Company. It's something, honestly, to be really excited about too. It gave me a lot of optimism for the foundation that's been set in the last 15, 20 years under Bob Iger, and the launching pad that we're on right now as Jon Favreau, as Josh D'Amaro takes the company forward into the future, and we see what comes next. And so as we wrap this up, the things that really popped out at me from this documentary, Disney World Building, or Builders, which I highly suggest seeing when it comes out on D23 on Disney Plus. You tell this is a busy week. Anyway, stories come from within. You got to balance yesterday, today, and tomorrow. You have to find that the perspective and the adversity, and through that, the expansion of the world. That changes your worldview, I guess, a better way to put it. And then the whole fairy tales encouraged through adversity. These are the things that help us discover our potential. Like when we have that adversity, those are the challenges that reveal what's underneath. And then there's that whole, you got to believe in the future, and then you got to make that future come to life. And then the immersive nature of really great storytelling. And as I think about this, there's so many things that we can observe with the Walt Disney Company, and we will be as we move forward. We might even have more conversations about this once more people have seen it, including on Geeks Corner. But it gives me a lot of reason to be hopeful about the future of the Walt Disney Company, but also be hopeful in our own lives. Be hopeful with Daps Magic. Be hopeful in whatever you're doing, whatever I'm doing on any given day, and having that belief in the future and continuing to work towards that future. And I think those are really great things to learn from some people who've done it very well. And so my question for you this week is, which of these principles or ideas from Disney Worldbuilders connects with you the most? And then on top of that, what Disneyland or attraction makes you feel most connected to the story? What draws you in? Does that connective thing, shared experience, and immersion? I'd love to know in the comments, or you can head on over to Daps HQ, where we have conversations like this, or even on Geeks Corner. It's all great. We'd love to connect with you at any of these places, but we will have daily news every day up on dapsmagic.com. We have more community and discussions on dapshq.com or on social media. Facebook is a great place as well to connect with us. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a different approach to a review. I didn't want to do just a, hey, I liked it, whatever. I wanted to change things up and kind of give you my takeaways as I was frantically jotting down notes watching this thing. And I hope you get the chance to watch it very soon when it's on Disney Plus as well. But I think that's all we got for you this week. I hope you had a fantastic D23 weekend, and I hope you got more sleep than I did and still have a voice. You know, things go the way things go. But that's all the time we have for you this week. So make it a great week. Keep kind, and we'll see you in the parks.